I just lost a bit also, not interest. I'm just following it with AI and AGI, but it's from the perspective of the viewer. If you are not in this sector, not working in it, it's a bit repetitive now. It's a bit too much. Everyone talking. Sometimes I must also change the topic, but I think this will change our life in many ways, doesn't it? What is your prediction for 2024 and from 2024 to 2050?
It's very hard to say. It's
everyone has some idea, no?
It's very hard to say, because I do think these new changes that came out just a month ago can greatly impact the software world. Software can there is a potential for software to become almost human-like conversations. How that impacts like the job market and everything, it would be interesting to see.
No, I was more thinking about, because you say, you know, people are talking about this fact that there is this sort of existential risk of AI that is coming, and that we should prepare it, and we should make new laws and so on. Perhaps I'm a bit too optimistic in this sense, but I don't feel that this will be an existential risk. I see the risk because you say it's almost human-like, and exactly for this reason, it seemed, I didn't do this myself, but I read people who use ChatGPT to create propaganda, to present certain facts that are real, that are true, but to present it and to reframe the data in a way that makes you believe the opposite of what is true. And that ChatGPT and these large language models seem to be very skilled in doing so. That they can represent, reframe the data and the facts to make you believe whatever. That's a kind of risk that I see now as a political use in a dictatorship, for example, that they come in with your screwdriver there and how do you say, change slightly the parameters here and there so that it gives you, reflects a certain worldview and a certain understanding of the facts without it distorts your conclusion without distorting the facts. I cannot describe exactly what they did. That they tried to use it for political uses. OpenAI, I think, did this once, and then they had to intervene because they saw that it can be used and it can misrepresent the data in a way that from your side you are not able, or unless you're an expert and so, you are not able to discern. And this is a danger that I can see may come. But I don't see these dangers of, you know, these existential risk scenarios, these doomsday scenarios, this Terminator-like things. That's
I don't know about the existential part, but also the point you mentioned about how it could get used in politics. I personally feel that it was already like that, even with politicians, like tweaking the facts to kind of.
But you have a tool more. It becomes, because then it becomes even more powerful, because if it gets into the hands of people who knows, maybe they are already doing this. We don't know. Yeah, sure, politicians do the same, exactly. But it would be yet another tool in the hand of, yeah, politicians of everything. Yeah.
Maybe it will just get more exposed in the next generation, where
I hope
it
so,
becomes
yeah.
more open. And it's very interesting because I don't know if you have any interest in astrology, but they are talking about astrologically this next era of Pluto moving into Aquarius, how that is an era of like making things, exposing things in public, where a lot of
Yeah,
truths
yeah.
will become more available to people. And what we used to believe as like history, or even things like what we used to believe, stories of histories, things like that will get a lot more exposed in next year.
Yeah,
So
I hope so, yeah. Yeah, and I think technology already gives us a bit this possibility, no? Yeah, but we must also grow as, yeah,
our own discernment.
yeah. If we don't have discernment, you can, again, also these things that will be exposed, you can again take them and twist the story again. Because I see that this is a problem that we have today in our modern culture. Well, it was a problem it is a problem of the human species. It has always been so, but especially nowadays with this misinformation, disinformation, fake news, half-truths. How do you say yeah, this misinformation, I see a lot of people who buy it without thinking about it. You can see it, for example, with climate change, where people immediately jump to conclusions. And what we need today is to learn to tip into different sources, not one source, not one leader, not one party, not one television or one social media, to be able to say, okay, Mr. X says so and so. Let me see what the counter opinion is, yeah, and so that I can balance. Yeah? Or I am for example, I have learned one thing, that when I have an opinion, I say, okay, let's see what the argument is of those who have the opposite opinion. And if I can see the rational, and if it can convince me, sometimes it does. Most of the times it does not, I must say. So perhaps I have still to work on that. But sometimes I find also very good arguments in the sources that I am usually not in line with. And that is something that we should teach to children, I think, in schools. I don't know if I already told you this. Yeah.
You work on progress of education.
Yeah, on education, yeah. No, but this experience that I had with my former pupils in school about nuclear energy, the use of nuclear energy for energy production. You know that there are those who are for, who are against, and so on. And once I gave this, because usually as physics teacher, you don't have political topics. But this is one of the political topics that comes up in the physics classroom. And yeah, I said, okay, let's discuss about that. And everyone wanted to, almost everyone was against. And I'm not for, but I said, okay, this is too biased. I say, you should argue, huh? And they argued only against it. I said, okay, now take a piece of paper Yeah? And you can also make your research on a computer with Google or whatever. And you have two columns, one column for the use of nuclear energy and one column against. It was such a pain for them to look for the arguments that are against their opinion and to list it also. But I am a bit of this, this is also an opinion, of course, but I am of the opinion that we should discover good old Hegel. Hegel, you know, he had this dialectic who said you should first make thesis, antithesis, and only then the synthesis. In a sense, you should always frame your opinion, yeah, okay, but also look for the counter arguments and then come to the conclusion. It was such a pain for them. They refused. No, it was a half revolution in the classroom. I said, no, I want to do that. And then, okay, at the end, they did it. It didn't change their mind, but I think we need that, because otherwise we will be fooled by this information, because there's so much information.
Yes, it's very interesting that this post-information or even like advanced technological era is kind of moving us into coming back to our intuition. It really matters, because if there is so much information out there to choose from, you come back to the same thing. Like now, what is it that I really feel it's the right thing to pursue? Because every avenue can provide. You can see this also on YouTube. There are so many different knowledge bases available. It's up to, it ends up being the person making their choice.
And you must have an inner feeling of what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
What do you mean by intuition? Intuition is a very general term. You can mean, it could be also, okay, what is for you intuition?
For me, it has been a practice. I think, I don't know if you have those experiences where sometimes you really have to work towards listening to that voice, because there are so many other voices on top of that voice.
Exactly.
Suppresses that real voice. It's kind of like if you turn down all the loud noises, then you'll hear the bird singing.
You hear the word singing. I like this poetic touch.
It takes time to remove all those noises and silent your mind, and then listen to that. That inner voice. And usually I don't know if you have these experiences where sometimes some things happen which don't go your way, but there is this sense of like, I knew this was going to happen.
You in advance.
But I did listen to that voice. I would love to hear, what is intuition for you? Like how?
I think you summed it up quite well. It is an inner voice, an inner intuition, and it has a particular quality because when you can catch it, it has much more the quality of truth than an instinct. Sometimes, because the problem is you already we're speaking about these layers, and there's this emotional layer, that instinct, that is a desire and would suggest you, and also the mind is very, very skilled in suggesting you something what you want to be, or want to be true, or want in general, whereas that's not the voice, the inner voice of the heart, and of intuition. And the voice of intuition has a more, it is a kind of quality of truth where you know, this is true, even though I don't know why it is true. If you come to a truth through a contrived, logical reasoning, that it's not necessarily wrong, but that's not the intuition. It's still, whereas and intuition is something that is quite quick. It's a flash. And in my case, at least, it is not connected to an emotion, or at least not a type of usual and the usual type of emotions. Yeah, you know that. It's a very calm emotion, if it's there an emotion. And yeah, and the problem is precisely this, that people, yeah, if you ask people, their intuition are often not at all intuitions. There are desires that they misinterpret as in, and that's the problem we have. We must learn to know ourselves, how we are made, how we reason, how we come to a conclusion, what is self-deceptive, and to learn that sometimes we believe in things because we want to believe it and not because this is my particular skill, that I'm always the realist, and then they come up to me and say, oh, you're so negative, they're a negative guy. Yeah, true. Sometimes I'm very negative because I don't want to tell myself fairy tales and try. Okay, I see this can also have the opposite counterproductive effects, in the sense that sometimes maybe if you are too fixated to the negative sides of reality, then it drags you down. So yeah, so in everything we need a sort of equilibrium, stability. But that's, I feel, and it's so easy to fool people with, I see this continuously. They just put online something and they jump on it and believe it. And that's a problem.
I resonate with you a lot on what you said about sometimes some things that people say it's an intuition, it may not be an intuition, because mind is very tricky in creating some stories and make convincing that this is what your intuition is saying. And I especially see that in the new age world, where people sometimes have this spiritual ego of like how strong intuition and everything. And they, when their predictions are wrong, they will create new stories around like why they were wrong. So it kind of moves from one story to another.
They build castles. Yeah.
And with intuition, I feel like you have to switch off all stories. It takes a lot of self-honesty to just see things as they are, neither positive nor negative, but just straight seeing things as they are. And it can be a lot of work, but it's worth it.
The self-honesty. Very good. Also another interesting. Yeah, exactly. Honest with oneself.
Yeah. About how you feel, what you think, and that's, I like that part of the, like some of the things Sri Aurobindo says, because it's your like journey with yourself. Like it's you don't have to convince or be honest with the whole world, try to convince them all about something. You just have to be honest to yourself.
Oh yeah. Yeah, in integral yoga, you will go nowhere if you don't let. And that's one of his precepts is sincerity. He didn't speak about honesty, but sincerity. He said, if you're not sincere with yourself and with the divine at the end, you will not go very far. And also in this Aurobindonian scheme, so we may get in this topic. Here also you have these different layers. There's the physical, there's the vital is a so-called emotional part of us. So physical, emotions, mind, and then the higher, let's just call it higher consciousness or I don't know, super consciousness, supraconscious, whatever you might call it. First of all, you have to become aware. Well, super consciousness, it's not so easy, but aware of our different parts. What am I believing now? Where does it come from? From my mind, my vital, that is my emotions, or from a higher intuition, or a mix of that, a frappe. And that's the main exercise in a certain sense of integral yoga.
I'm glad you brought it up because I did want to do a deeper dive into your paper that you shared with me. And thank you for sending that because it definitely covers a lot of ground, at least like kind of like a higher level vision of Sri Aurobindo's. I would love for you to speak a bit about how you would describe Sri Aurobindo's notion of evolutionary progress.
Oh, yeah, it's very different than any form of, well, first of all, the word progress, it's already a minefield, no? Even though he speaks about it, he talks about progress, because what is progress? Yeah, these are again these kind of notions that everyone has an intuitive understanding what it means, but when you try to define it, these words, because of course in technology we have technological progress, in economy, economical progress, in culture, cultural progress, and nobody knows really what it means. In evolution, in science, there is not at all a progress in Darwinian evolution. In Darwinian evolution, it's not about progress, it's just about change. The species changes, etc. It's interesting that you makes this question, because I just had yesterday with a friend of mine this discussion. What do we mean really by progress? It's something undefinable, other than saying that it is a development of the soul. It is a soul that develops and grows from its state of ignorance in matter to a state of knowledge in spirit, but remaining in matter, without transcending and going into some nirvana or something like that. And this is the spiritual evolution that Sri Aurobindo had foreseen. And he already says that what we call Darwinian evolution is in reality only the outer aspect, the outer appearance, a physical appearance of the evolution of the spirit. Because before this evolution, there was an involution. That is the spirit, which is all knowledge, ultimately is a divine, as a Brahman, or as God, whatever you might like to call it, and that plunges itself into matter and enters in this forgetfulness of itself, and also becomes many, because first it was the one, and then now we are the many. You are Suma, I am Marco, and there are other 8 billion people only on this planet, and without counting all the animals and so on. And in this state of forgetfulness, this is what we call ignorance. We have forgotten our true nature. The progress is that this soul slowly, from life to life, progresses to its remembrance of its own self-identity, and grows and develops towards a higher state of consciousness. And that's why we have this Physical is at the base, vital, mental, and then the superconscious. And we are actually in the evolutionary stage of the mental. We are very intellectual. Well, no, by the way, not everyone. We have to work also on this, as we have already discussed now briefly. And yeah, that's the progress. If then wants to add to this a sort of qualitative understanding that it is a progress from worse to better, this is not necessarily it is from undivine to divine, but the undivine is not necessarily good or bad. It's unconsciousness, yeah? It's ignorance. Yeah? So this is the kind of progress that is meant by in Sri Aurobindo.
I think you froze a bit, Marco. Do you mind repeating the last portion you said about the qualitative version of the progress?
I meant that there is also sometimes this connection between progress and the idea that something gets better. Well, I would not say that this is entirely false, because in my opinion, a bit something gets better, because if you are we also these things we cannot define, but what is really meant is a progress from the soul, from its state of forgetfulness, to the development of a remembrance of itself and to its divine origin. If undivine and divine must also not necessarily bad or good, but undivine means in any case in a state of unconsciousness. And if there would not be any qualitative difference, I would say, because nowadays we have this tendency to say that we should be not judgmental, no? That we should not make this distinction between bad and you. I understand this. It makes sense because what is good and bad for me is maybe the opposite for you. It depends a lot from our cultural from our culture, from our ideas, from our religion, from our political beliefs or whatever. But here we have this progress from the undivine, which can have not always nice expressions, to the divine, which is the ultimate, well, it has this positive quality. And in any case, it's a very different kind of progress than the technological progress. And that's the point that also we need today. We have to understand that also some other kind of progress, the spiritual progress, is possible. Because nowadays, when we speak of progress, we normally think of technological, industrial, economical, material progress. But there can be also spiritual progress. And this kind of paradigm shift still is lacking. We have to do this. And this Copernican revolution is still needed.
And how does the Sri Aurobindo's theory of evolution compare with some of these other modern theory of evolutions?
Yeah, as I said, it's the Darwinian. On one side, that's the Darwinian evolution is one aspect of, in reality, the whole of evolution, which is seen in this spiritual emergentism. I call it spiritual emergentism, where the spirit emerges in and through matter. And the Darwinian evolution is not necessarily wrong, because nowadays we have also this tendency that if you have a spiritual understanding of the universe and you are maybe you do not sympathize very much with evolution, scientific evolution. But all these ideas of evolution that we have today are mainly, as far as I can see, related to material aspects, to technological evolution, to the evolution of the species, and the evolution in terms of genetics. And we are still, and morphology, body, we are still referring to something material, which is not wrong, but it's only one part of it's only a subset of a much larger set, where all is part of a plan, we can say, of a spiritual plan, of a higher plan, where we need, the spirit still needs this Darwinian selection rules, for example. You know, so in Darwinian evolution, there is the law of genetic mutations, drifts, random drifts, and the environment that selects the species. This is true. There is this mechanistic aspect. Why do we need it? Because since we are in a state of ignorance, we need the environment to make part, to bring forward this evolution. But we are now becoming slowly a self-conscious species. We are still not self-conscious really, but we are becoming slowly self-conscious species that is discovering it's the spirit. And the most powerful aspect of the human being is that it can actively, willingly participate to this evolutionary progress of the spirit and matter. Because the ultimate goal is that to unite spirit and matter, whereas it's not only the evolution of the spirit or only the evolution of matter, because in the ancient, the mystics were more oriented towards the evolution of the spirit, but not so much matter. The material society is all about the evolution of matter, whereas in Sri Aurobindo you have this integral view where spirit and matter co-evolve together. And that's the final aim.
And to kind of like do an even deeper analysis of Sri Aurobindo's work, one thing I noticed, like in his work, he uses a lot of different words like supramental, overmind, subliminal, overmind, supermind, supernature. I'd love for you to describe some of these words, and then maybe we can take a look at the portion of your paper where you have described some of these planes.
It is too verbose. Too much, too many, right? Is this your impression? Yeah.
The words, like they, it can be like, for example, can I share your paper?
You can share the screen, of course.
Can you see?
Okay, yeah.
So,
it's quite long paper.
Yeah. So over here, I'd love for you to share ideas on supermind, overmind, and cosmic mind. Also, like vital energies.
Maybe can we go? Perhaps there's another diagram previously,
yes.
Because to connect to this one, one should have in mind. Yes, exactly that one. So you see here. First of all, I must say, nobody should take these graphs, mind maps, topographic representations literally. And these are just conceptualizations that help the mind to understand something that goes beyond the mind. To understand these things, for example, the limitation, we can see, we already said, the material, then there's the subconscious, vital, mind. So vital, mind, and body, material, we know what we are talking about, no? Then I've previously said there's a superconscious, meaning all this higher hemisphere, which Sri Aurobindo subdivided in higher mind, illumined mind, intuition, and these are the next levels, and in an ascending ladder of the spirit from its state of ignorance to a state of knowledge, from a state of forgetfulness to a sort of gnosis, where our cognitive system, our way of conceiving the world, or seeing the world and perceiving the world, is augmented by these supraconscious state of knowledge and consciousness, what Aurobindo simply called also gnosis. And these higher mind, illumined mind, intuition, overmind are just the intermediate steps of different levels, of different steps of the ladder of an ascending consciousness. Yeah? And it is, he called it the higher hemisphere. Satchitananda is the ultimate, yeah, it's the Brahman. You have also this in the non-dual teachings, and the Brahman in the Vedanta, or you can call it God. It's a transcendent, it is impersonal. Then there is a manifest world. We live in a manifestation. This Satchitananda is beyond time, is beyond space, is beyond the manifestation, but also manifests itself in space, in time, in matter, in the manifestation. And it does so by descending down through these levels of consciousness, planes, Aurobindo called it planes of universal consciousness, where the supermind is the highest form of consciousness that connects the transcendent with the manifest, with our universe. So it is not necessary to understand every step, even though it is interesting, but they simply are the connection point between the mind and the highest consciousness. Between the mind and the highest consciousness, there are different levels of, of consciousness, of knowledge, of gnosis. Usually you don't jump immediately from one to another. Even sometimes some have this illumination, it can happen, but usually it's not that like that. But what is most important for me is just to know that there is this higher hemisphere. It's not so important to know all the details. There is something that goes beyond mind, but it is not just the transcendent. Our universe is made in many layers. The material layers, the vital layer, the mental. So, and this mind, for example, take the mind. So this is more, it's something near to our ordinary consciousness. The mind is only an individualization of a cosmic mind. So we have planes and parts. The planes, the cosmic plane, mental plane or cosmic mind, and the individualization of this cosmic plane is one of my mind, your mind, etc. So it's a bit a cosmological picture. At first, it's complicated, but when you have when you enter in this grand vision, a lot of things in evolution, in science, in biology, in psychology especially, I would say, begin to make much more sense, because we have this integral view of the different parts and then connect these dots into an integral whole. So we can now eventually go to this other slide, page.
The one I showed before?
Yeah. So we have this supramind, which is the creative power that stands behind in all the manifestation of the universe. It is the real idea, everything that we see, perceive, you are an idea of this divine, divine consciousness. A very good idea, I would say. I am an idea. Every object and everything from this highest standpoint of the supermind, everything that manifests in the universe is to say, we can say a sort of symbol. And it has first a complete unitary, an absolute sense of unity. Everything is one without a second. But then when it descends from the supermind to the overmind, which is the overmind is the highest level of the mind, where there is a first fragmentation. You have the multiplicity, because in the supermind, everything is still one, is all unity. In the overmind, there is a first principle of fragmentation, where the one becomes the many. But it is still in a state of complete knowledge, or almost complete knowledge. Yeah? Sri Aurobindo said that this is the plane where the gods reside.
I want to bring in some other school of thoughts over here, like just for comparison. For example, Carl Jung talks about the idea of archetypes. As in theosophy, there's this idea of monad. They kind of like point to this field of archetypes.
I understand what you mean. Yeah.
So do you think like supermind is kind of referring to the similar concept?
The supermind, in fact, I call it the super archetype, because nowadays everything is super, hyper, ultra, no? But it's a bit a play of words, if you wish. But the supermind is the highest possible archetype. Yet I think that what we perceive as archetypes, are not really the supermind. That these are the levels of the higher mind, the intuitive mind. The first layers beyond the mind. There's the higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, and then overmind, and then supermind. And what Plato, for example, saw with his archetypes and his Platonic realms and so on, and also theosophists, and also a mystic. A mystic must not necessarily dwell on this highest levels of consciousness. A mystic may well not go much beyond the higher mind and interpret this real idea as archetypes and sees. So what we really see as perceive as archetypes intuitively are probably already reduced forms of the supramental real idea. Because in the real idea, there is no division, no separation. And so, but anyhow, the intuition of the intuition is correct, I would say, yes. It's about archetypes, But already on the overmind, you have already also archetypes. The gods are archetypes of specific powers, and they dwell on this overmind level, plane. Does it answer somehow your question?
I'm trying to, if you could elaborate on some of the subtleties of supermind and overmind, like kind of what's the nature of supermind and overmind. I think that may help in understanding it a bit better than the example I gave.
Let's see a metaphor. The supermind, the symbol of the supermind is the sun. The overmind, the symbol, it's my symbol now, it could be that of the ocean with the waves. This is also a typical symbol of the Vedanta, no? Where the supermind is the sun, where is only one, where has a complete gnosis, and where you have the knowledge by identity. You know things by identifying with them completely. Whereas on the overmind, you are already in a domain where the rays of the sun are reflected in many multiple entities on the ripples of the ocean, so to speak. That's a metaphor, of course. But we can say overmind is supermind in its multiplicity, without having lost his original knowledge and knowledge power, which is a knowledge by identity. What is knowledge by identity? For example, when you look at a chair, you don't see the chair as it is, because in the chair is also a symbol, an emanation of this ultimate reality. But you think it's a divided object from the rest of other material objects. You don't see the connection. You don't see the oneness when you look at the world. Whereas at the level of supermind, you not only see that it is all the one expressing itself in itself, but all what we see with the mind is only a shadow, a reflection, misrepresentation of a true reality, that with the supermind you can see things as they are. And where you have also the supreme discernment. We were talking about this discernment. We need a bit of supermind. You have the supreme discernment of truth. It is a truth knowledge. I unfortunately, every time when I use this word, people say then, but there is no truth and there is no true or false. Well, at the level of supermind, according to Sri Aurobindo, you have a truth knowledge of things. Yeah. You have a truth vision, truth seeing, and truth hearing. Also, at the perceptual level, it is described as something unitary. Yeah. The overmind is also a level of complete knowledge, almost complete knowledge, but there the first principles of fragmentations appear where, well, for example, you have the Big Bang. It was first one, and then it becomes frozen as well. Oops. Oh, yeah. Now I see you. And
yeah, you froze for a bit. You were talking about the Big Bang, and after that.
Okay. Yeah. And when the Big Bang, in essence, is this spirit that through the supermind and the overmind manifests the multiplicity, but this multiplicity is an aspect that is inherent in the overmind, because the overmind has this aspect of multiplicity, whereas the supermind is all oneness. Then this manifests on the physical plane, which in reality is a plunge in ignorance. That's what I was talking about previously. And Sri Aurobindo distinguishes in two types of natures, a higher nature and a lower nature. The lower nature is the kind of prakriti. There's paraprakriti and aparaprakriti. Aparaprakriti is what we call nature, which is the nature of ignorance. All the universe is, if you wish, trees, animals, nice environment. Our world, our biosphere is the expression of a lower nature. Why? Because we are entities that are forgetful of their real nature, entity, and destiny. Whereas, however, in the background, still the higher nature is still there and is determining the evolutionary process. Behind the veil, it is immanently influencing this process of evolution, which on one level is in ignorance, and on the other level is, however, influenced by a state of knowledge. So in a certain sense, we can also talk of ourselves. We feel inwardly that there is in us something, someone that knows very well. But our surface personality continues as a habit and with its beliefs and whatever, mechanistically almost, to repeat certain patterns in ignorance. And here we come perhaps to the psychic being, to the evolutionary soul, we have a soul that is a spark of the divine. And this is a very different notion that we have in modern psychology, in Western psychology at least, because here you have the vision of a soul that also grows, evolves, and develops in this life and from life to life. And this is what Sri Aurobindo calls a psychic being. But to conclude, may I just get to this, just so that we conclude this slide? So they...
Yeah.
So you see, the overmind expresses itself in the higher nature, yeah, where, well, it's behind the veil, and the lower nature. This lower nature is made of the cosmic physical. It's what we call the universe. When we speak about the universe, we speak of the universe, the physical universe, stars, galaxies, planets, and so on. This is a cosmic physical. But according to this mystic cosmology of Sri Aurobindo, there's also a plane of cosmic life, which individualizes in individual living entities, that is us. Then there is a plane of cosmic mind, and which individualize in the single minds, that is us, or also the mind of animals or whatever. And so what is interesting here is that there is not only just one cosmic, it's not a dualism. It is multimodal, spiritual understanding of reality. There's not only just matter and mind, but there is matter, cosmic, life, cosmic and individual, or physical, cosmic, individual. Our body is individualization of the cosmic physical, life, cosmic life, and then there's individualization in our emotions, individually, cosmic mind and individualization in our mind, single mind of everyone. And then there are also these higher levels of superconsciousness that you can find on the higher nature and so on. So again, these are just schemes. We should never take these literally. It just diagrams to, yeah, serve our intuition, to go. It's a mental representation to go beyond mind itself. Don't take it literally. And there are not these clear-cut borders. It's a way of saying that our universe and we ourselves are much more complicated than a black and white mind-body dualism. Yeah, so I hope that I've given a little picture of the thing.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. And I know we have to be careful about not getting attached to different terms and kind of being rigid about terminologies.
Absolutely.
And I'm asking this out of curiosity because I've come across different terms in Sri Aurobindo's work is Gnostic being and psychic being. Does he use that interchangeably or they're different?
No, the Gnostic being is the ultimate realization of the yogic transformation and the spiritual transformation also at the physical level. And as far as I can see, there is so far nobody is a Gnostic being. The Gnostic being is a future superhuman. It's sort of Nietzsche's Superman, but something very different. It's not the same thing. This is a spiritual being that has ascended to higher levels of consciousness and had also an opening of the psychic being, which is the soul. It's a soul being. It has a spiritual transformation, a psychic transformation, and this is the ultimate vision of Sri Aurobindo, that one day a new species will emerge from this spiritual and physical evolution, and that he called the Gnostic being. Whereas the psychic being is a soul, is our soul, our individual, my psychic being, your psychic being, and so on. And this psychic being is, it is also located in the heart chakra. It is, but it is obviously only where we feel it. It has not a geographical position in space and time. It is something transcendent, but it is our soul which evolves, and one day this psychic being will enact this physical and spiritual transformation and transmute the human species in what Sri Aurobindo calls a Gnostic being. Yeah.
And can we also talk a bit about the nature of this transformation, how it shows up in real life? Like, for example, what I've noticed is like when you do physical yoga, over time, you don't realize like how now your body can do things, some things that you couldn't do before. And with, I feel like with this type of meditative yoga, similar results can occur for the mind with the thought structures, where some ideas which were not easy to perceive, your perception opens up with work.
So the question is, I'm not sure if I understand the question. You mean the question is also, what about the practice from the practical point of view? How can we get into contact with these realities
Not
in our everyday?
How does one notice that these changes are occurring in a person? Like, is it?
Well, first of all, let me remind you that Sri Aurobindo said that all life is yoga. All life is yoga. So that everything, what happens and is the expression of this kind of process. As I said, also the simple material Darwinian evolution is the expression of the evolution of the spirit in matter. Once you take this perspective, maybe it needs a bit time. It's not something that one is able to do it from one day to another. But remember always that it is all one and yet many, which has involved itself and makes much more sense, also for me at least. And how this can be seen, I don't think that it is much more different. Also, what other spiritual and mystic schools teach, there is an opening, an awakening, an enlightening. However, here, Sri Aurobindo said that the yoga, his integral yoga, begins where the other yogas end, where the non-dual teaching ends by this awakening to one's own true nature, and you have this non-dual realization. Sri Aurobindo said, yes, that's a wonderful thing, but it's only the first step. We have to go beyond and transform. So there is this idea of a spiritual transformation, which is made of mental transformation, physical transformation, and vital transformation. The physical transformation is the last one. Even it doesn't mean that it can begin also before. There's not a clear-cut sequence. But vital transformation, let me make an example. A vital transformation is get our emotions under the control of the spirit, not these erratic and instinctive, almost animal emotions that we have. And it is about to transform these emotions to human emotions, which are all very often not very noble emotions, to divine emotions. And one does this by the practice of integral yoga. And the same thing happens also for the mind. There is this mental transformation where one has to calm down the mind, and this is very in line with the usual traditional Vedanta or other spiritual traditions, where you have to calm down the mind. This is overlaps also in integral yoga. What is less usual, then there is also the transformation of the subconscious. There, when you begin to get into contact, yes, with the subconscious, because when you calm down the mind, when you calm down your vital, your emotions, when this divinization begins, what happens is, unfortunately, not that you will live in this great bliss, but all what you have in the subconscious emerges, comes up, and then it is presented to you, to your consciousness. You see who you are, yeah? And what you have in you. And then it can be, that's the difficult part, the transformation of the subconscious. All the things bubble up. And all these must be presented to the divine as an aspiration. Yeah? And Sri Aurobindo once said that he was once asked, what is the best form of meditation? He usually did never give a precise form of meditation, because he says it's up to everyone. It's something very personal. Yeah? What a good meditation, a meditation that works for me might not work for you, and vice versa. But when he was pressed, he said, well, if I must make a choice, he said, it is being always concentrated on the divine. This concentration on the divine is what, and the surrender, the act of surrender to the divine. This is a practice of integral yoga. And you have to surrender also the subconscious to the divine. And then it was not finished there either, because when you have also transformed the subconscious, you will realize that also the physical, your body, is a can of worms, we can say, in a certain sense. And this is the ultimate transformation, which must come after the I just jumped a bit. No, physical transformation comes after the psychic transformation and the spiritual transformation. It's psychic is a psyche in the opening of the heart. You become conscious of your heart. And the spiritual transformation is a transformation where the supermind and the higher planes, the superconscious levels, descend from above to below. So it's not only an ascension of the individual that aspires and through practices of meditations or whatever tries to ascend, but it is also the divinity that descends. So it's a double movement. Once this is made, then you're almost a perfect being, but still not, because you are still an incarnated being and you are subjected to the inertia of matter. And that's the ultimate transmutation. Yeah. Where you and Sri Aurobindo and his spiritual partner, which was Mira Alfassa, which is also called the mother, tried this ultimate transmutation, but it probably will take some time that the humanity has to evolve, because this transmutation is possible only if also the rest of humanity will ascend to a level, or at least an average, a critical mass ascends to this. So I'm sorry, I already went through and digressed about, but I hope that, how do you see a person? Well, someone who has this vital transformation, it should. Mother was once asked, what is the sign of the supramental, someone who lives in the supramental consciousness? Her answer was very surprising for me, because she said, a perfect equanimity. Whatever happens, also the worst thing, you are in a perfect equanimity. You are never, so this would be the sign of, but you know, I would not look so much to his external signs on others. I would like to see the internal signs in myself. A calmer vital, a calmer mental, flow of energy. And the distinction between the traditional spiritual schools and this one is the other spiritual traditional schools were okay with this realization of, of one's own spiritual reality, nature. Whereas Sri Aurobindo said, no, that's not enough. You have to transform also the mind, the body, and then the vital, and then makes this ultimate transmutation, which is a supramental transmutation. So it was a very long, sorry, interrupt me when I'm too long with my answers.
No, that was really good. Thank you for elaborating more on that. And from what you spoke earlier, I can see like how emotions and even your body may not be the true indicator, because if your cognition is fragmented, your emotions can be running off of those kind of like patterns your mind is bought into, or your body may be reacting to some patterns that your mind is bought into. So that transformation would first begin from, as you said, like spiritual transformation and psychic transformation. Once that is transformed, when your cognition is transformed, then your emotions and how your body reacts to it, it's kind of like a side effect.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but I found very interesting this fragmented cognition. That's perfect, wording. That we perceive ourselves. Yeah, we are a fragmented being of many parts and many planes and many natures, and the aim is to bring them under the unitary control of something that knows much better than us. Yeah. And you're right. But this is already not a high state, but it is a step forward, that to become aware that we are made of these different parts. And that's, you can see, you probably know this better than me after all the interviews that you have made with. But many often non-dual teachers say, yeah, I had this awakening, but I see that I'm still subjected to this emotion, this mind. I have sometimes these reactions. And well, okay, for me, these are appearances. I know that it's not me, but I see that there is something that continues, habits and so on, which is not necessarily something negative. It's okay. We could not exist without these things. But this also means that there is a lot of work still to be done to divinize. A habit can be a very mechanical and ignorant habit, or it can be a divine habit. Habits are not necessarily negative. You can have, or your reactions can be okay or not, but you must have this discernment, and you must bring them under control. This is something, control not of your personality, control under the divine control. And this is something that in the Western culture we don't like, because no, control is repression. Yeah, yes and no, it's not really that. It's not about repression. It is about transformation. Yeah,
I agree. Like, rather than using the word being in control, I see it more as being in tune with who you are.
Wow, yeah. Another word. Yeah. I assume you as my next proofreader. Even it's not, you can perfect English, not like me, because I have this difficulty. I don't find the words. I know things, but yeah, I'm there. I cannot. I stutter a lot, and so they don't come because I know them. But yeah. So, what is your feeling? Yeah, describe this. What is your feeling of the different parts? How do you live these? How would you explain this to other persons? The different planes and the different, because you say you calm the mind, and then the emotions go and make another thing. And the body, you said the body, by the way, also illnesses, our health, and so on, is pretty much dominated by belief systems, by what we believe, by what we think. This is also something that one realizes when one makes a bit this yoga. I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you live this a bit? I don't practice this yoga, but you were mentioning a bit this experience.
For me, this kind of interactions is kind of my version of yoga. Everyone has like different, like, especially in integral yoga, I think it's pretty much kind of common where everyone has a different path. It doesn't have to be like, or everyone has like different practice. It doesn't have to be one set of practice. For me, these conversations with different speakers, as well as reading, has been my version of practice. In general, I do resonate with a lot of what you are saying, where even arriving at that cognition, just becoming aware that how initially that how the programming of mind, and even that can take such a long time. And in many cases, we've seen that most it don't even arrive at that cognition. And so going beyond that cognition and illumining those paths which were kind of like fragmented, it takes time.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
It takes no. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to wrap up my sentence, but I'll let you speak. Sorry.
No, it takes time, but the decisive experience is, first of all, one must become aware of these parts that we are made of. Because when I say subconscious, okay, the physical is obvious, it's our body. The mind, when we speak about the mind, the people have completely different ideas what the mind is. Sometimes the people say that emotions are an expression of the mind. Nope. For me, that's not my experience. Mind, for me, is an intellectual tool. When I think about something, whereas emotions, thoughts are one thing, emotions are another thing. Physical sensations are another thing yet again. The subconscious is yet another thing again, because also the subconscious is not something of the mind. It is something that affects the mind. And then there's the supraconscious, which is, yeah, let's loosely speaking, a higher form of consciousness, of which we are only dimly aware. But I think everyone has an intuition of what this intuition might mean. And when you practice this yoga, one of the first things that you become aware of, in fact, that you are like a matryoshka doll. And we are really dolls, puppets, in the hands of these forces that throw us around here and there. And we think we are the doer. We think that we are those who are in control. But in reality, we are just slaves of these, especially in our times, I would say, slaves of the vital, first of all, that emotions, the strong emotions, these are really something on which humanity is now working on. But also the mind, our belief systems, we think these are our beliefs. In reality, you begin to realize, where from do I have this idea? Where did I get this idea from? And you don't know where from. But to become aware of these mechanisms and of this multi-layered reality, you have to practice a bit this yoga and bring also this psychics, this soul forward, because it's able to illuminate and it is able to put you in front of reality. Not always that nice, but yeah.
Yeah, and Sri Aurobindo describes also in his book that this process can, it's not like a linear process, like it's kind of like waves, where sometimes you make a progress and settle back your in kind of in between to your comfort zone, and then make even more progress, then come back and settle back to a comfort zone. So it goes in. It's not a linear process, like step by step you move forward.
Isn't this an experience of everyday life? No, for me, it's for sure. I don't know, but I think for everyone, no?
Yeah.
For you also, no?
Yeah, for me also. It takes, and with this type of work, I've seen that it takes time for it to settle in. And I can resonate with also some of the things Sri Aurobindo talks about, how before making a big jump, it makes whatever that spirit is, it will make sure the previous stuff is all resolved before you can take that step forward. So, and even with the cognition of like the kind of like witness awareness or non-duality awakening, it takes time for it to fully settle in.
Yeah, because these are a good part, they are energetic processes also. There is an energy moving, and also not only your body, but also this vital sheet, this vital body, this emotional body must be able to integrate it. The mind, when it gets transformed, must also be integrated. But this is still the easiest part. The less easiest part is when you fall back and you find yourself at square one. And we think that it is a fall, but in reality, it is also, yes, you say you have this duality of involution, evolution, involution, evolution. But the important point to remember is that, yes, it is an evolution, then you fall back, but you don't fall back completely.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Like for
otherwise,
example,
would be no point to do this yoga, no? Yeah.
I completely agree with you. Like, for example, now I won't fall back to a stage of questioning about non-duality. It's because I feel like once that realization, the non-dual realization occurs, once it's seen, it's very hard to unsee that. And to go back, it's almost, so each phase you go through, like that fall back, you can't be that low, like it.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's important, as you say, when you see that, means that you are conscious that, and mostly here again we could come into the education thing. We should also teach children that every fallback is never a complete fallback. It's part of a learning process, and you can see that in yourself. You fall back, okay, it is part of the learning process. Not always it's so easy, but it is a curve that falls back, but on the average it goes up.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like the ppm of CO2 we have actually. I don't know if you saw these graphs of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that goes up, but there we have the opposite thing. It's bad, not good, that it's going up. Yeah, it's something that makes so. Yeah, and at every fall it's normal. It can be sometimes also a catastrophic fall if we are not conscious of our planes, parts, beings. We are not conscious of what we are doing, and we allow dark forces to hijack this process. This is what Sri Aurobindo said happened with Nazi Germany. Germany was, with its culture, was opening slowly to a higher spiritual realm with its culture, with poets and philosophers and artists and whatever. But a power, because when there are these openings, also new powers develop. And if you have too big ego, and if you are not mature enough, and if you are not, and if the psychic being comes not to the front, and the spiritual transformation has not been actualized, which is the higher cognition comes into with its discernment, these forces can be hijacked, well, by something very dark. And that's what happened, according to Sri Aurobindo, in the Second World War, in the last century. So you see that this process, again, is not only individual, but is also collective. Collective, individual, individual and collective, universal, collective, individual. Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying something?
No, I don't know. Already
it's very interesting you said that, because I was wondering about that very recently, where sometimes, even if you're doing this work or something, sometimes I feel like there is the collective energy that can kind of put kind of like a topper, like you can't go beyond that, and depending on what's happening in the environment, those negative influences can kind of limit how far you can go. And sometimes you can be like, before I used to feel like I was not even aware about those things, but nowadays you can notice that even in dreams, like sometimes dreams can be very illuminating, very like they can highlight your blind spot and very educational. But if the collective energy is down, it can show up even in the dreams, that where dreams can get disturbed because of those influences. It's very interesting where at least to be at a stage where one can be aware about that rather than it just happening, but being there's a difference between when such things are just happening as a random chance versus being aware about.
Exactly. That this awareness, it's fine. It's good that you have this awareness, because it changes a lot. It gives one also much more energy. Otherwise, one falls into depression, because if I all the things that I get bombarded with would have already been depressed, have me depressed me completely. If I would not know that these are part of this process, and that part of my evolution is highly dependent also from the evolution of the collective. And you cite, in fact, the dreams. Most of our dreams are subconscious and are very fuzzy and disordered dreams, pretty chaotic dreams. Well, it depends, but one can also have higher dreams. But no, I think most of the dreams, the nice dreams that we have, we don't remember. We tend to remember the ugly dreams. So this is another aspect that we should not forget when we have these dreams. And this was a big problem of Sri Aurobindo and the mother when they tried to make this physical transformation. They said this, the body receives, even if not through social media or whatever, which is, but there is a sort of, how do you say, not infection, not congestion. What does a virus? Okay, there is sort of radiation that influences our bodies, also at the cellular level, that does not allow, it seems so far at least, to make this complete supramental physical transformation. But we can work on our vital, on our emotional bodies, on our mental bodies, and become aware of what we are, really, and then work on that. Because if we don't become aware of what we are, then it would be impossible to work on it, yeah? And to offer it and to surrender it. Was I frozen?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Was I frozen? No.
No, I was looking up the word for what you are describing. I think Rupert Sheldrake, he uses the word morphic field.
It's something, yeah, I think he is on something there, yeah. Of course, Sri Aurobindo, at those times, he didn't use this word. No, what does it is not a congestion when a pandemic, I don't remember. It's like a virus, yeah? When your bodies infect each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. It's kind of like a field of that from which your body picks up, especially if you're not aware about those dynamics. You're kind of like just running that program. Your body is automatically running that program.
Contagion. Not congestion. Contagion. Yeah. The body is running your program, but this is almost unavoidable. The body is deeply entrenched in the unconscious, inconscient of matter. To bring the light down there is almost impossible, mission impossible at this actual evolutionary stage, yeah. They tried to do this, but they saw that their bodies are subjected to this contagion of the collective bodies. Why? And this makes sense because Supermind, as we said, is all about unity. You cannot do these things alone. It must be in the collective, in the end, to create a new unity. Sorry, go ahead.
I find it fascinating, everything that you mentioned about that. And I'm a new learner in astrology, and some of the things that gets talked in that world, that's what it kind of, it's interesting, like how different field of thoughts can sometimes match, because some of the ideas in that world of astrology, some astrologers are kind of pointing to how there is like a change in background frequency that is happening in the upcoming years, where those dense background frequencies will be lightening up over astrology. I see it just as like forecasting. It's not like it's not really like set in stone or anything, but it's more like, I see it more like energy reading, reading collective energy. And it would be interesting to see like if that kind of frequency changes for the collective field, if then it will be a bit easier for to make these kind of transformations.
Exactly. Yeah, it would be easier to make this transformation because the transformation is, and that was all what the message of Sri Aurobindo was. Yeah, this humanity is going towards a higher frequency, so to speak. He used different expressions, but it is a collective consciousness, which is it is the yoga of the collective in a sense, no? Because all life is yoga, and this collective is doing its yoga, and it is rising to highest frequencies, but it needs a sort of critical mass, a threshold, to enact really this transformation. Yeah, it's a very long thing. I mean, this paper is I don't know, more than 30 pages long. But if you go through, you will spare your time in going through thousands of pages, because this paper is a sort of summary of the summary of all Sri Aurobindo's not yoga, but cosmology. The yoga this is a cosmology, as a background. It is a bit sort of theosophist approach to Sri Aurobindo's vision. But I wrote it because for people who are interested and curious, but don't want to go, because all these informations are scattered in his writings. And he wrote a lot of books and thousands of pages. So 30 pages are still, you will go through that faster than all his books, which in any case, I suggest to read at least a bit here and there.
Yeah, you did a great job with that paper. Thank you for synthesizing some of these major concepts because you get a lot in those 40 pages.
Yeah, 40.
It's nice to kind of have a concise version.
Yeah, it might give a first impression, a first intuitive understanding. Again, it's not necessary to know all the details, but it lays a basis with which it may be easier to read Sri Aurobindo's writings, which in fact are usually a difficult read. It's not always that easy to read him. Yeah, I know. I hope that I made a service to someone at least.
I'll be including that link in the description.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
But is there anything from that paper, any ideas that you wanted to share that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
Well, the initial aim of this paper was to make a connection between Western philosophy of mind and the Eastern spirituality. Because you know what, I found it a bit dissatisfying that the Western philosophy of mind is still stuck there in this duality, in the dualism. There's mind and body, mind or matter. And then they think, how can the mind interact with the body if it is something spiritual, immaterial? And it goes on and on. It's a very coarse-grained cosmology. It's only, eventually there's a soul, mind, body, something like that. Yeah. Whereas we are much more complex beings. As we already, and one can discover it by oneself. You don't need to be a philosopher. And yet philosophers are still stuck there in this coarse-grained vision. Whereas, say, Sri Aurobindo is a good example how that tells us that reality is much more, it's more complicated. You will need more time to understand it. But once you have done so, you have a much vaster vision and much better understanding of reality and also especially of yourself. Yeah. So this is, I think, the message that I hope to transmit. Let me make an example. In the modern Western philosophy of mind, very often you see that they speak of mind and consciousness as the same thing. But make just a simple first person experiment. You will see that that cannot be, because mind is about thoughts. Thoughts come and go, come and go. These are mutable, impermanent. Whereas there is something, someone, somehow, that sees the thoughts coming and going, but is permanent. There's a witness that sees the thing. So you cannot say that mind and consciousness, this is consciousness, no? The witness is consciousness. What Western philosophers of mind would call qualias, in this case, these are mental qualia, so to speak, are impermanent phenomenal events, whereas the consciousness, the witness, is a permanent, something that has a permanent awareness of something. Well, I don't go into the topic if consciousness and awareness are the same thing, let's forget about that. But there is consciousness and mind. You cannot conflate them. The consciousness is something completely different, and you don't need to be a philosopher, just go inward. But our modern society is so externalized that we are not aware of that. Yeah? And yet it takes only a little exercise to see this. And this changes a lot when you make a philosophical discussion, conversation about these issues of metaphysics, mind, consciousness. Does brain produce consciousness, or is it something else, immaterial, and so on?
It's what you mentioned about the idea of involution, where if consciousness is infinite and can do everything, it can also choose to go into a very this specific experience that it want to experience and forget about everything else, and maybe we have gotten into the deep end of that where we have gotten so specific that we have forgotten that we are part of.
Yeah. Aurobindo calls it the exclusive concentration. How does a mind come from a supermind and a cosmic mind? Because it's the cosmic mind that concentrates in itself a little mind. And that's a little speck, but it's still the cosmic mind. My mind, your mind, is still the mind of the cosmic mind, but in its exclusive concentration form. And this goes so far that we forget everything from the external world, not from the external, but we focus too much on one thing and forget of the rest. And this is a process that we are in, and this has its evolutionary necessity, because we need to externalize to get to be able to control matter, for example, through technology, what is technology after all? It is an ability to control matter. No? And this externalization was necessary, and also mentalization of the species was necessary to develop it, to develop the mind. Science, the primary evolutionary aim of science is that to develop the mind in the human race. And by doing so, we tend to forget who we are, because externalizing, we forget our internal parts. And then we conflate mind with consciousness, mind with emotions, make a potpourri of all that, and on that construct theoretical castles.
And maybe that is the next development, where we don't have to forget, where we can have this exclusive experience, but also be in touch with the cosmic being. So it doesn't have to be either or, both.
Yeah.
Is possible.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it is called integral yoga. Integral because it aims at integrating the cosmic with the individual, and the immanent and manifest with the transcendent, and with the finite with the infinite, finite with the infinite. And but that's why it's so difficult, because it asks you to do everything. It's not that easy. I think it's the most difficult yoga, and that's also why it did not have this, still not attract this attention. It's more non-duality nowadays. I'm not criticizing this. It's probably also this makes part of the evolution. It's necessary. But at least I suggest to have at least a glimpse on it. to know that it exists can help.
That is true what you mentioned.
You know, Don Salmon, no? He says he discovers in these personalities autistic traits. I don't know, I'm not an expert of psychology. Yeah, that's precisely, but what, in any case, I don't know. It's not so important. I don't want to criticize that. The most important thing is to become aware, and they are becoming aware. Also, these non-dual teachers, I see them. Yeah, there are now some who are speaking of. I don't know if you know them. These of them. Devotional non-duality. Did you see them? Yeah.
I haven't.
Yeah.
I kind of lost interest in that, and
Okay.
I haven't been following non-duality a lot.
Okay. No, it's just a phenomenon that I was hinting at, that there are now non-dual teachers that are discovering devotion. It's strange, huh? Isn't it? Also, Don Salmon follows another teacher. I don't remember now his name. But there is a change in this. But of course, that's our evolution, where we make it, and that's typical of the mind, that when you make a great discovery, for example, you discover your nature and so on, you tend, or whatever kind of discovery, also external discoveries, you tend to believe that then everything can be explained, everything can be reduced to that. Yeah, you see this in science, for example. They see that evolution is determined, for example, by the genetic code. Then we can explain everything with the genetic code. Or they see that they discover that there are processes of natural selection. Or then we can explain everything in evolution, Darwinian evolution, by natural selection. Which is not wrong. These phenomena exist. These discoveries are true. It becomes a problem when we think that this is all. That's it. Yeah. And that's a typical attitude of the mind, which has a tendency to take the particular and to extend it to all the multiplicity. But it doesn't work like that. You are only discovering a subset, and be aware that you are still seeing all this little speck, a pixel on a monitor. You're not seeing the entire film. And these non-dual teachers, I think, yeah, it's all nothing. It's all about only being. It's true, but it's not the end of the story. Go beyond that.